thank you
Mhm.
so much for speaking with us today, Stephen.
Mhm.
And I don't want to mangle your name, so can you
Oh,
tell me? Yeah,
yeah,
a little
yeah.
bit.
I'm Stephen Oyarijvbie, and I'm a combat designer at Sony Santa Monica. Yeah. Mhm.
How totally cool, wonderful. So I don't know, where do you want to begin? Do you want to begin at the beginning when you were a kid? Do you want to begin like where you are now? Where
Yeah,
would you
yeah. Let's
start?
start there. So I was diagnosed, maybe they discovered that I have dyslexia back when I was in like third grade, third or fourth grade. They just noticed that I wasn't picking up reading and writing as fast as other kids. And after a couple of different tests, they were able to discover like, oh, he might be dyslexic. So they put me in, and I love my school district for this, Red Mill and our and the whole East Greenbush School District, who had the resources to help me through this process. And um, it was such a wonderful experience. But there were some times where I really felt like I wasn't as smart as the other kids, or I was treated kind of like by the other kids in a way, not because they were malicious, it's just they didn't really understand why I needed assistance in certain areas. So what happened back then for me was, well, why is he not getting it? Why is he acting out? A lot of times I was labeled as not like a bad kid, but a disruptive kid in a way, because for me, I had a trouble writing notes or making sense of somebody else's notes or something like that. So why isn't he writing notes? But if you called on me, I could tell you what was going on. And a lot of times I had to memorize all the notes in my head so that I could show up for the next class or whatever with the information. And I might just be rambling at this point, but one of my schoolmates, she would actually write down a bunch of notes for me too, so I wouldn't get in trouble. So she was wonderful. But basically, all in all, they discovered I had dyslexia. I was almost held back, but I was able to do like a summer course. And 2 weeks or like maybe even a week into that summer course, there's nothing wrong with this guy. Like he just looks at his L's a little bit differently. He needs a little bit more time on tests or anything like that because the time pressure is really tough for me. But if somebody is able to sit with him and talk to him about what's going on, he's able to articulate. He's actually really smart. So yeah. And then
Yeah,
what are some
yeah.
of the other
So
questions?
I would
Yeah.
like to just touch on some of
Mhm.
that. So,
Yeah.
so you seem like not a disruptive person.
Oh
So,
yeah.
yeah, but at the same time, we hear, because I interview a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's such a stressful time, and the research coming out suggests that as a group, dyslexic children seem even more emotionally reactive, emotionally sensitive,
Hmm.
potentially more empathetic, even
Oh yeah.
than other groups, and so it's like this tremendous kind of psychological stress that kids get put on. They don't know what's going on,
Yeah.
you have good relationships with your family, with your with
Hmm.
your fellow students, and then suddenly it's
Hmm.
all these things that get added on and there's no explanation. So so do you remember any of the kind of things that you ended up doing or
Oh yeah, when I was younger, I didn't have any good ways to cope with it. I didn't even quite understand it, right? I'm thinking about like third grade to fifth grade is sort of like the figuring out process of like, oh, he has this, but we're not sure what to do with it. And during that time, yeah, I'm very sensitive to criticism or how my classmates are feeling and communicating with people sometimes might be a stressor in how they respond to me, right? I might take that like really deeply. So that was the figuring out phase. And when people were thinking I was slower, that really made me sad. High school is when things started to get a little bit better. There was the Wilson Learning Program, and my school a had teachers, multiple teachers that were trained in it. And so for half the year or a certain I don't remember exactly how it worked, but like felt like every other week we would go and we would train these things. And in that way, I started to learn how to read a little bit better and really excel there and communicate a little bit better. But what I also had up from fifth grade, even through high school, was a teacher's assistant and a class to go to for people who needed more assistance in things. but the stigma that came with that is just like, oh, he always has his teacher with him. He must be, he has issues, emotional issues, learning issues, like just being labeled with a learning disability and being slightly different. But actually, there was times where I felt more advanced than the other kids, but I couldn't prove that. And
Yeah,
to
no,
them,
it's beautifully put. Yeah, and
yeah.
do you remember like some of the things? Because I definitely want to look at strengths when you were a kid too.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah,
in a situation like this where you realize you're more advanced, do you remember like were there subjects, or do you think like some people will say, well, I
Mhm.
knew what was going to come next, or I
Mm.
really understood. Some people were having a hard time with this, but I just got it. Do you remember sort of things like that?
Yeah, I was crushing it in math over a lot
Is
of
that
times.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, because for me, math had like very simple solutions. Like I could look at it. Its symbols weren't backwards or anything for me. So, maybe there's other people that struggle with that, but like math had like solutions. The only thing is, because I don't like to write very fast, I could solve the problems in my head, and then it would be slower to actually write it down and
Show your work.
show
Yeah.
your work, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There's also a game that we played even in third grade, maybe even fourth grade, which was called Around the World, where each kid there was desks in rows, and a kid would stand up and move forward, and the teacher would hold up a flashcard, and you had to yell out the answer, and then you could continue. A lot of times I could get the answer, but I wasn't fast enough to receive the symbols and deconstruct it and then say it, right? So, but last superpower that I had with this teacher's aide, Miss Woodward, shout out to Miss Woodward for helping me. She's still a lifelong friend. I love Miss Woodward. Um, she would read Harry Potter books to me, and that would inspire me to like want to learn more things. But the cool thing that I could do was I could remember the entire page that she was reading to be like, okay, this is where we were. It would be the next day, 2 days, whatever, be like, oh, this is, they walk through the corridor, blah, blah, blah. And that we'll talk about it later. That serves me in my job today, and it served me in so many other places that I can remember things auditory or because I'm not, a lot of people think their notes and like see their notes written, but I'm like, oh, I remember what you said or remember what you were wearing and things like that. So,
Wow. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And a lot of people can't do that,
yeah,
which
right.
makes a huge difference, right? Certainly in business too, and certainly in big companies.
Mhm,
The fact,
mhm.
like, I can't remember who you are, or like,
Yeah,
I know you, but I don't even remember what we said. So yeah, really valuable, great for also, people skills and things like that. I
for
mean,
sure.
I think that's wonderful. So I do ask a lot of people, when you were like there's the saying like you show me the person at 7 and I'll give you the man. Was there anything when you were 7 years old
Mhm.
that has a connection to where you are? Was there something you were
Mm.
kind of excited about,
Oh
or
yeah, yeah, I make video games today, right? So like I knew I wanted to make video games since I was 4 years old,
is that right? That's
watching
so cool.
Clarissa Explains It All. Yeah. So we didn't know how to get there. And of course, a lot of the things were like being disruptive is like that's not going to get you there, and not being able to, because I had those extra classes where I needed assistance in just regular school. I couldn't take the cool electives until almost my senior year of keyboarding or programming. So I only
Wow.
got a little bit of that, and then in college I struggled with it too. But if you showed me the 7-year-old, he's a guy who is creating these worlds and these things because yeah, it was easier to have it in my head and have these rules than to like interact with other people and try to show them, like, so
So like
that's where
I
it
would
comes
love
from.
to hear a little bit more about that. So like, would you imagine storylines, or sometimes play something, go, why did they do that? It would have been better if you did this. Is that
Yeah,
the
yeah.
kind of
I
thing?
was analyzing things all the time. I'd make a little playground games or different games with my action figures. I think a lot of kids do this, but I had a really big war between stuffed animals and Legos once upon a time, and had a floating base. Yeah, it was a whole
Oh,
epic
that's
saga.
cool.
It was really good.
I don't know. I only had campfires with my stuffed animals, so I would never go
Well,
anywhere.
Beanie Babies came out, so there was like a
Yeah,
war
there you
between
go.
Beanie
Yeah,
Babies
if
and
only I
Legos.
thought about that. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's really
yeah.
cool.
So,
How neat. That's really
mhm,
wonderful. And so let's flash forward. Well, let's see. Before I do
mhm.
that,
Sure.
because um, so maybe I should do like you did a little bit of programming when
Hmm.
you're in college, but like there are some kids certainly in Silicon Valley, they
Yeah.
pop out of the cradle and they're being given all these things about how to like
Hmm.
program. And
Hmm.
so you know, it's different if that was like one of your foreign languages when you're in elementary school
Right.
and someone picking it up later because like you say, this is something I heard. I mean, I interviewed a graphic designer and she
Mhm.
said, I never had art classes in school because I was in all these pullouts.
Yeah, yeah,
And
exactly.
and
Mhm.
she said it was this chance, like, art elective in college where they said, "You know, you might consider this," like, I never even thought about it, you know what I
Right,
mean?
right.
So I think that's great to hear because, you know, parents and also students, they're just, you know, I think there is a lot of purpose for getting the supports and
You're
remediation,
right.
but, you know, because then you go to higher education, but the downside is that you may not know, you know, you may not know your real strengths,
Yeah. Mhm.
and even in college, it may
Mhm.
not seem like, "Wow, this is the thing that I'm really, really, you know, good at." So
Yeah.
so what happened after you graduated?
Yeah, so luckily in high school, I always had this singular focus. It was like I was going to get to college, and college was going to be this wonderful place where everybody wanted to learn, and it was going to be great, right? So I was really focused on that, and I had some opportunities maybe to go play basketball or volleyball. I was really good in volleyball, pretty good in track, but I really wanted to focus on my mental. So I found Rochester Institute of Technology, and I went there because they have a gaming program that was like starting. It was like bubbling. It was like a concentration. The big challenge for me was I had so much support from maybe sixth grade up through high school that now I'm thrust into college, and maybe I get a note taker, but again, I've had a note taker experience. Just having the notes isn't always the best thing. But I had a little bit more time on tests or quizzes. Um, but yeah, it was a struggle. And even one course, programming, I was great. I went straight through it. There's like two tracks. There's like a slower track where you can get really intimate with the code. But there was like a fast track that I was excellent at. But there was one course that used a lot of slang, but it was important that you use these like keywords like select and union. And I think it was like a database thing. And I really struggled in that course because I would make things and I'd never spell select right. I still, if you ask me right now, I probably would have a
I won't
couple, yeah,
ask you.
hard, yeah, it would still be tough. So
Yeah.
there's times like that where there's code that I can just write and it doesn't really matter what the name is called. Like instead of trigger, it might be Winnie the Pooh's Tigger, or whatever. But there's other places where it's very strict and it needs to say this command, and I can't remember exactly how to put together that command. And this is after the Wilson's program and things like that.
Mhm.
So, um,
So
luck,
before we go
yeah.
here, because sometimes I get asked about this,
Hmm.
are there certain languages that you feel that are easier or better suited to dyslexic
Mm. Uh,
programmers?
oh, I don't know. I'm not sure if I think of my languages like that, but what I do use is use the Open Dyslexia font, which was introduced to me in grad school by my good friend Brian May.
Uh-huh.
He showed me that really helped, and I can even get that into my coding practices. We even have it integrated to our things at work. I think for me, but what I found is there's a lot of other dyslexics in my industry that just kind of cope with it and then like don't even know really that they have these issues. So I don't know if there's a particular language, but there's different applications and fonts and strategies that I use to make navigating through the world a little bit easier. Today, now I use like Google Drive and I speak into it a lot. And then I might use like Chat GPT to clean up if I need to send an email or something, I might use that to like clean up my sentence structure. It sounds really robotic, but if it gets the
The
message across,
workflow.
it's helpful. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. And
Hmm.
now I've even heard ChatGPT will help with coding, but I thought
Hmm.
someone was telling me that there are these because they have these, I don't know what the, I'm ignorant
Hmm.
about this. It's
Sure.
like macros. Well, I mean, but it has ways that even if you misspell it, it'll come up with the thing. Is that right? Is that what?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I've got different apps and ChatGPT, it knows what I'm talking about and it can spit out. And now it's like even good because it'll give me a couple of different ways to say something.
Uh-huh.
Before that, I was using like Grammarly. I'm always using something to help me with spelling. But the big thing too, because I was so focused on just learning how to spell words, is the grammar and sentence
Syntax.
structure,
Yeah.
yeah, word commas, I don't know, semicolons,
Yeah, commas. I'm bad with
yeah,
commas.
whatever. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
There was even a
But I've heard
portion.
actually for languages, I mean, am I wrong about this? I thought
Mhm.
there were, I forget what it was called. But I thought that even when you're programming, they have like these drop downs, so you don't even have
Mm.
to, is that right?
Oh yeah, you can use visual scripting, and some
That's it.
pl-
Someone was telling
plat
me about that.
yeah, some platforms will have it'll predictive text, I think they kind of call it, for the
Mhm.
application. So if you're trying to write out a variable or you're
Yeah.
using some library, it kind of knows, and that's helpful because I can still recognize that this is the right word. Sometimes I just can't formulate it. I started reading this book, The Dyslexic Advantage, to help me break down like what's actually happening in my mind,
Okay,
which was
we wrote that. Did you know we wrote
what you got. Oh my God. Oh,
Well,
thank you
I should
so
say
much.
Brock wrote that mostly, but I'm the second author.
Oh my goodness. I didn't even
Yeah,
put together the connect.
that's
I'm
so
right,
nice.
because I'm always taking shortcuts. So I was like, oh, this is so cool that they're reaching out to talk to me. These random people that now, I read this book. So yeah, that is so helpful because I realized that it's my thing is I can't process. I don't know what this sound makes, and there's so many rules to things that I don't keep it all there. The more I learned about reading, the less my capacity to just remember things shrunk because I like had to remember to me all this junk of these rules and blah blah blah. So if you ask me to memorize a page right now, I can't do it. But back in the day when I had very little
But by ear
reading,
you can. That's the
yeah,
thing.
yeah, oh yeah, sure, sure.
And personal
Mm.
experiences. I mean, that's the
Oh
whole thing. I mean, just
yeah.
part of it is there's this kind of waiting game. Occasionally, parents will say, "Oh, they just can't remember like the dates in American history." I'll just take them away from distraction. I'll put them
Uh-huh.
at the dining table. There'll be nothing around, and then you'll sit there, and it still won't go in. But actually,
Mm.
if you got them out and you talked about it, or you made some funny story up about things, then it's memorable.
Mm,
And so there's
yeah,
a lot of kind of instinct about like how, how just a totally different way for learning. And it's a great way for being out in the world, but it's
yeah,
good in seclusion,
yeah, yeah.
especially,
It's
you
it's
know.
it's definitely, yeah, yeah. I think the book also highlighted like this thing I never I took for granted. I always took it for granted, was like I don't get lost. Like I always know how to find my car, or I know how the streets connect. And then I guess we'll talk about this when I go to work. I was doing encounter design for this video game. I could remember the spaces and the creatures that go into it still to this day. Like, oh yeah, this space has three enemies, and then the fourth. Like I can remember it like a sequence that just happens, and this three-dimensional connectivity of like where I am relative to my car. If I cut across the street, like I don't have to follow I always remember the path, but I don't have to follow the path because I kind of know how it connects it, even if I had never seen it. I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
oh,
no, which is not everyone doesn't have it, and I
oh
definitely
yeah.
don't have it. I mean,
Mhm.
sometimes like when we first moved into this neighborhood, I remember, like Brock would say, Brock would say, where, go north. I was like, I don't know where north is,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
then he would give me instructions. And if I went out, like if I was at a store, I went out the wrong driveway,
Uh-huh.
I'd be totally lost.
Oh
Like,
yeah, like
you
oops.
know what I mean?
Yeah,
Or then
yeah.
I would say, okay, I know to get there, or it would be right, right, left, right, but I didn't know
Hmm.
where that was. Or I'd say,
Yes.
look for the tree with, like the house
Yes. Yeah.
with the tree. And so it's landmark based
Yep.
rather than, but now I'm a little bit better. Now I know that if I get a bird's eye view,
Hmm.
I can remember, but I'm still more of a route finder.
Yes. Hmm.
Now there's like a science behind it. It's very different. That's why, I mean, as a group, this is not absolute. As a group, men versus women, as a group,
Hmm.
men are more likely to use like spatial and geometry.
Okay.
And so it'll be like, no, I don't know where I am, but I know it's over there somewhere. Okay,
Yeah.
women are like, if I'm off the route, I'm lost,
Yeah. Right.
kind of
Right.
a funny thing. It really is
Yeah.
different. It's really
Yeah.
different how, but it's a great thing, I would imagine, for the,
Oh.
having spatial imaginary worlds.
Mhm.
It's absolutely ideal,
Yeah. Yeah.
and also you can play games and remember all these different
Oh, for
variations.
sure. Oh, for sure. And that's super helpful for me because I can remember a lot of things in games. I can remember where to find things. I skipped over it when I was younger, but a lot of times I wouldn't be able to remember how to spell or do something, but I had like a strategy guide that had the word in it or something. And I'd be like, oh, well, in this book on this page, it says
Yeah.
this, right? And it even helps me. I train Muay Thai now too. I have a very keen eye of recognizing patterns and things, but I'm like, oh, I can remember like this person did this a couple moves ago, or
Wow.
he tends to, yeah. So like my memory on a thing for things and people and routes is like through the charts. So
So let me see that word you used. What is that word you used? Is that
which one?
what did you say when
My
you this is martial arts? This is
Oh, Muay Thai. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Thai
yeah. So
boxing.
what is that?
Oh, Thai boxing is the art of eight limbs. It's sort of like boxing, kickboxing, where you punch and kick, but also throw like elbows and knees and things like that. Yeah.
So
So
you're probably in really good shape.
yeah, I'm in yeah, phenomenal shape. Because like I've always needed so much assistance with everything. Everything uh I love to learn, but everything is a challenge, and the gym is one space where I can do it for myself by myself. I didn't really need a spotter or anything, and I could excel there with very little communication or very little need for words because I always feel like words are kind of the enemy. Um, so yeah, I've kept up my fitness since high school to
So
this
you
day.
discovered it in high school?
Yeah, yeah, I've always been really athletic. Um, my dad was like a bodybuilder in Nigeria, and maybe he just passed
Oh.
on some really good genes. But there just wasn't a space like being disrupted, being that bad kid, uh, didn't allow me to have that space until about high school or so, where they were like, okay, well, you're pretty tall. You should probably play some basketball. And yeah, you should
Well,
probably
the
run
interesting
track.
thing is about also about martial arts, it seems to me. Okay, now I'm totally ignorant. I know
Yeah.
my parents signed us up for like, pee-wee karate, and it was like below
Yeah.
belt or anything like that. It was really bad, And so
Mhm.
that is all I know. But I think I watched, what a crouching tiger.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that's about all I know. So,
Mhm.
but it seems to me what's interesting about that is that it's very dynamic. I mean, it's
Yeah.
very you have to be very reactive. Like some people won't
Mhm.
be able to react so much. And the fact that you can almost replay it, it's like that's the ultimate kind of kinesthetic thing because it's in the
Mm.
body, but also would be really good. I just hadn't thought about this before, but it'd be really good from the emotional perception side
Mhm.
because you can perceive
Oh yeah.
the movements that are
Yeah.
because
I
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, no, I can feel it. All I say is like it's oh, they're about to do this, and that
Interesting.
emotional, perceptive side and the kinesthetic can even help me like identify people by their movement. I wear glasses, but like if I see somebody walking, I'm like, oh, that's Dave, or I can hear his footsteps, the cadence. I'm like, oh, that sounds like, or their voice from a distance. I'm like, oh, I think that's so and so. I'm usually right, like probably more than 80%. I can even identify twins. I'm like, oh, that's Joel versus Mike, so
Wow, that is no, that's a superpower too.
yeah, yeah.
That's so cool. That's really wonderful. I never really thought about it that way, but I think that's got to be well, I'm so like of course now I've got these little Rolodex in my
Mhm.
head, like scrolling through all
Yeah,
these kind
yeah.
of things. So there's a couple things that come to mind. Like I do know that when we were interviewing sort of like college students, there seemed to be a lot of soccer goalies
Oh, yeah.
because you perceive what's going to happen next
Mm-hmm.
and what the
Mm-hmm.
movements are going to be. So three-dimensionally in front of the net. So there were a lot of things like that. But another kind of interesting thing that's on that kind of kinesthetic, nonverbal side is one of our partners in this social purpose corporation we have is this a serial entrepreneur who's a dyslexic guy,
Mm.
and he did some stuff for Department of Defense where they were trying to analyze when like terror people are coming at these at these guard stations and stuff like that, and they need to have like cameras for who's behaving
Mm.
differently,
Okay.
and they were looking for a way to, for instance, connect wounded warriors who are,
Mm.
otherwise don't have much to do, but they can tag or recognize unusual behaviors. But that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of an interesting thing,
Yeah.
dyslexic wise too, because and they were looking for computer algorithms that can actually
Mm-hmm.
identify interesting clusters or unusual ways that people are moving. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of things like that you just wouldn't, you wouldn't think of as being a talent, and it's certainly not going to be like on a high school test or something,
Yeah, yeah.
but
No.
it's so valuable, right? In many
Yeah.
different ways. I think that's I think that's really fascinating.
Yeah, you really can't judge my intelligence based off of like what's on a test or thing. Like, right, if you just put me in a classroom with a bunch of words and books and told me, do some stuff, I seem like a really poor performer. But like actually I excel in a lot of different areas. It's just you, we have to do things a little bit differently. Recently I've been learning how to play this card game, Spades, and I hold my cards backwards, which I didn't even notice that I did, right? And it's such a weird, yeah. So but like even in that, I'm like, I'm learning this new thing and just like I'm slightly different there. Now I pick up the game pretty quickly and I understand a lot of the nuances are like without in the first or two sessions, but they're still like, oh, if you just judge me on how I hold my cards, like I don't, or that I can't shuffle because I don't, know, it would be bad. But jumping back really quickly to the kinesthetic things and why I enjoy combat or fighting or sparring is because I felt like that was a really fast way of communicating. I feel like I recognize that this person's doing this and I'm going to react this way or anticipate this thing. They're going to do the same to me. And I feel like we really understand each other. Like I'm in your head and you're listening to me. We take turns, right? And we're having this conversation without words. So there's this real closeness I get or this understanding I get after I've like worked with somebody or sparred with them or competed against them that I struggle with when it comes to text messages or sometimes even like talking in person still because there's some things I don't pick up or quite understand.
Yeah. Well, I just think that the ability to replay or just know or recognize, I would think that that also makes you a very good teacher,
Oh
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Right? Because
love giving back.
otherwise, there's some people like, what happened in the game?
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
it went by so fast, or something like that. I mean, they won't replay. I mean, I would think people like, maybe dancers or something like that.
Hmm.
They
Hmm.
would be able to kind of replay that. Like it's it's almost like replaying a movie, but it's not just seeing it.
Hmm.
It's feeling it, which is much more difficult to actually understand for people who don't have it.
Yeah, and being able to break down what's happening moment by moment. That's what I've always known as noticed about like seeing something or perceiving something and be like, oh, well, this happened, which caused this. And I'm able to articulate and explain it, which has helped me with my work. But it's also helped me in like personal situations because a lot of times I see something and figure out what is the simplest way to explain it. Now, it might take a while. I'm usually slow in explaining things or finding the right medium to express that. If you want me to, make a document or even a video, I'm like thinking about how do I say it? How do I do it? So
Mhm.
it can take
But
time.
I would think if you're working with someone, if you're coaching someone one to one,
Oh
I
my
would
goodness,
say,
yeah.
okay,
Then
yeah,
it you go
that's
quick. You do it, I tell you, we'll go real fast.
yeah, oh, that's great. So, okay, now a lot of people, when they're little kids, they think, "Gee, I would love to be in this industry," but then it's
Mhm,
it's competitive, if you don't have, a connection or something like that. How
mhm.
did you go from, schooling to
Yeah.
getting your first break?
Yeah, so the RIT really trained me up. I made a lot of games there. I also had this initiative within myself to turn every other course that wasn't gaming related into something gaming if I could. So if I needed to learn about a historical figure, I'd learn about a predominant like game designer and figure out his philosophy and talk about that, right? Like,
Cool.
so I was always looking to get ahead because I spent most of my life all spending more time on anything, right? So like I have to position myself to give myself an advantage because of the difficulties that I'll face doing any task. It feels like any task, right? Um, so where does that come to play? So I really excelled in the program and I became like a delegate. I became like a representative of like what you could do with game design, right? Even with that, I wasn't able to get a job right out of the gate. I ended up working, not that I couldn't get one, like I could do it, but somehow in interviewing processes, I couldn't articulate how much of an asset I was. So I worked for the school for a while and made some other games, and then I got a big break working on an indie game and moved to Texas, worked there, and then my connections, these great friends that I had through college and friendships that I kept up, helped me get a job at Microsoft, and from Microsoft it really exploded as like getting my name as this person who could do really good work fast and complicated things to working on another indie project and eventually working for my dream studio, Sony Santa Monica. But I had been practicing working for Sony Santa Monica since college because they had been writing wikis or having videos or GDC talks talking about what they're doing. And I was always absorbing that information and always putting it into my work, thinking that I'd work for somewhere like them. So when
Mhm.
I got there, it was like, oh, this guy is like, he's very versed in our philosophies. Now, there's different challenges that I face at work, right? Especially like work from home was like a terrifying situation for me because now when I walk over to somebody's desk at work, I can act it out, we can talk it out, maybe we take some individual notes and we go and do our awesome thing. But now when I'm working from home or something, I need to type it out. I need to read that email, or did I get the notes, or did I update everybody with an email or a Slack thing? And maybe that's taking more time, and time is crucial at the job. So if I'm taking more time, then I'm not excelling and I'm not communicating, and I'm a bad communicator now. And so it's been tough. So the good part, how did I get there? I gave myself as many advantages as I could by learning things and making opportunities for myself to make games and demonstrate that and keep that up on a website or keep that up through different learning portals, YouTube, all that things. I eventually learned how to crack the coding interview or practice how do I sell myself in these interviews, one of which was really difficult for me, was an all-day thing, and I didn't practice my speeches, and I didn't bring a juice or like something to keep my energy up because I think talking with people sometimes drained me. So I had to learn that about myself and become a better interviewer, just to convey the information that I had in me. Um, where does dyslexia come into this? Like, how do I write a resume? How do I do a coding test or a quick email, a challenge writing something? I have to find ways to prepare for that. So I think I just created little stories on my resume, had other people look over it, resume writer, friends look over it to really drill it down. But then I had to just mentally remember, oh, if they question this on the resume, this is the story that I go to, and it always funnels back to one or two or three stories, right? I have a great memory, but like I'm trying to give myself an advantage on these things. So um, it was little things like that. I
That
took,
sounds
yeah,
brilliant.
yeah.
That's
So
totally brilliant. Yeah,
yeah,
I love that. Thank you for sharing that.
so
Yeah,
thank
it's
you.
awesome. Actually, I do have a friend who is just finishing college in game design, so I'm sure he's gonna be like pouring over this.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
sounds like great advice. But you also just, I mean, I think just organizationally, you really did some smart preparation,
Hmm.
and it seemed
Hmm.
like that indie game also you're willing to move,
Hmm.
and where's your home originally?
Yeah, I'm from upstate New York. I'm from Albany, New York.
Oh, okay. So
Mhm.
yeah, so big change going to was it what did you say,
Yeah,
Texas?
I moved to
And
Austin,
then going to
Texas.
California. Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
So
but
yeah.
Seattle first. I moved to
Oh,
Seattle
that's
and then
right,
I moved down.
Microsoft. Yeah,
So,
but but also people say you learn a lot by being in different companies and be able to
hmm.
take that sort of you know. So I guess my question is so how much of your how much of your job is it everything? Is it concept? Is it, it's not like
Well,
it seems like you do come up with the ideas. You
hmm.
also, obviously have this physical experience in things
Hmm.
like combat, and so do you do it from beginning to end, or is
So
that
my
right?
job is to basically coordinate a lot of other people's work, animators, visual effects artists, sound designers. I have to inspire them one, and then I have to get their work and connect it into one creature or asset while communicating upwards or downward. What is this creature? So I will script and hook up how this creature works or the concept of the combat or interaction between the player and this creature. How does the creature challenge the player in some interesting way? And then I have to go out to other teams and say like, hey, I need this animation. And I know you love your 4,000 frame animation, but I need it to be 6. So, so, how do you do that? How do you get everybody together? So it's a little bit of problem solving, people talking to people and working with people, and then a little bit of coding and then the fun creative stuff. And that's, there's not, but the creative stuff for me is really well because I have so many constraints. So I'm like, oh, well, I probably can't do that thing. Not maybe not can't, but like it would be too difficult. time consuming or difficult for me to do it that way. Let me try to find some other way that's interesting and solves some other issues for myself and makes the character interesting.
Yeah, wow. So that has a little bit of all the mind strengths in it, right? Because it's how the thing moves.
Hmm.
There's a lot of story in the
Yeah.
design of the character and
Hmm.
in the design of how it moves, revealing the character and how
Hmm.
how it engages in the bigger picture of the game, interconnected, right? Because
Yeah.
because all these characters interconnect with each other. So you want to have a distinctive, kind of character
Hmm.
these strengths because you've got to make predictions about how, you know
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's kinda cool.
It's
Yeah,
gotta stand out amongst the other cast members. It has to be readable. So being dyslexic sometimes gives me an advantage there because I think about that. Like, how can this be accessible? Like, how much time should this move take? A lot of other designers do it too, but like it's so ingrained in my nature. Like, I need to be able to read the silhouette or taking a still image of the screen right now. What's happening? Can I make sense of it? And that is a super important thing for me. Like, is the guy over there a threat or is this person a threat? Like, I need to be in one frame, be able to understand what's happening and make a good decision.
yeah, I mean, it's a filmmaking thing too,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, excellent, excellent. That's really cool. Well, it's awesome.
yeah.
Do you have any advice for young people as well as advice for parents?
Yeah, I think advice for parents would be like patience. My mom had no idea that video games would be awesome. I don't know if she's ever played one or even really understand what I do, but she gave me the space to like be excited about this thing and do it. Right? And back then we didn't know. I went to school, I graduated in 2010 and then graduated in 2012. But leading up to that, it was like video games. I don't know. So having patience and understanding for the excitement that I might have and the setbacks or the pace or not understanding what I'm trying to do, I think is a good thing. For kids or for professionals in training, I think it's about not getting frustrated with yourself. There's definitely things that you're going to struggle with, and you just have to really lead into the things that you do well, making sure that you um, can compete in the things where you struggle. Like, you gotta get that up to a certain degree, but don't just focus on like, "Ah, why can't I spell select?" I'm like, "Okay, well, I can't spell select, but maybe there's other things I can do well, and I can really lean into those strengths. I have a good memory of this, so it helps me in this space versus this one. So let me try to avoid doing history classes where I have to remember and write down a bunch of things and try to lean towards classes that I can express myself in a better way. So find those wins and focus on those wins. And anything that you struggle with, just try to get it to a place where you can compete a little bit, but don't dwell on it. Don't dwell on how people treat you. Don't you are smart. You're probably smarter than a lot of people. It's just the world isn't set up for us, so we have to navigate it slightly differently, and that gives us an advantage in some spaces and a disadvantage in other spaces, and that's a huge win. I think that I got that really from your book. But I guess the last quote is like the thing that makes you exceptional is eventually the thing that makes you feel most alone. So a lot of my life I felt alone in the way I communicate or the way that I think or see things. But that's just what it is, and that's what makes me special. But also sometimes makes me feel really frustrated that other people don't get it the
Yeah,
way I
well,
do.
I think it's beautiful, like what you've done with your life and career. I think it's really inspirational. That's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
How big is the studio in Santa Monica?
Oh, yeah, it's pretty big. I think we have maybe 300 people actively working there
Is that
now.
right? Okay.
And maybe that doesn't sound big for big corporations and your Googles, your thing, but that's pretty big for games, and we consistently, keep people on and keep hiring people.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's a lot of people to talk to and keep in the know.
Yeah,
So,
well, I think I love what you said about also listening to the developer conferences and
mhm.
trying to get the philosophy and seeing what they're cutting edge, what they loved as a group. I think that's just, it's such a smart thing to do, and also to find out, that this was a great place for you. So,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
wonderful that
They
you're doing
really worked well to accommodate me and different things. Like I said, as soon as they knew that I had uh these challenges, they were able to integrate like open dyslexia in different fonts. And accessibility is a real big thing at the studio now, and probably was before, but we increasingly getting better at it, developer side and player facing side. So I'm so happy and lucky to be there.
Yay. Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
thanks so much. This is wonderful. I
yeah,
do have just a little a side question because
sure.
I remember actually he's doing really well now, but I
Hmm.
remember there was a guy that we interviewed who actually spoke at one of our conferences who said that he had a hard time entering like game companies because of the time tests.
Yeah. Hmm.
And it was he said it was data structures tests, and he said
Hmm.
a lot of times it wasn't even what he was going to be doing. And he
Yeah.
found his way. He worked for the university for a while. And
Hmm.
I think that's a good, place to be when you're trying to figure out how to get in. But ultimately he found his way into companies, and I think he's a vice president of a robotics company now, but
Great.
he found his way in by being a contractor because if they
Hmm.
knew it
Yeah.
worked.
Yeah. That's how I got into.
Is
I
that
start.
right? Is that
Yeah,
right?
I started as a contractor in encounters. But well, yeah, what he's speaking to, time tests even at home would be difficult for me. Another thing is really hard for me, even in meetings, but especially on the interview, is writing on the whiteboard. Like the terror that strikes me, especially in this, everybody's looking at you and like, again, select. How do you, it's not always select, but I'm
Yeah.
writing this thing, isn't even gonna make sense to them all of a sudden, and I still have to solve this problem. So yeah, in an interview where they don't know you from, Susie Cream Cheese, they're over there like, why is this person taking, why can't their handwriting's weird? I can't understand. It's just another reason for them not to pick you up. Now you might be the best candidate, but you're just struggling to communicate that.
Do
So
you ever
luck.
disclose? Do you ever disclose?
Oh, not right in. Oh my goodness. Even, I mean, I love how my studios embrace me, but like I'm often afraid to lean on it more than just like, oh yeah, no, I'm just like I use this, it helps me read things. But like why is this taking so long? Well,
Yeah.
I have to think about every sentence or word that I want to put on a page. I watch my coworkers write a quick
Yeah. They just
chat, yeah, and
say
it's
that. Yeah.
nothing for them. And that
Yeah.
could be 10 minutes for me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
but telling them that, especially in a competitive environment, it's like, well, is today going to be like, well, oh, we're not going to get rid of you because of this, but like, yeah, you do take a long time.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, I didn't even think about that at the interview setting because
mhm.
I know I once spoke to an Amazon designer and he said that when that comes up at meetings, like he doesn't really he doesn't really disclose in the workplace but he'll
Yeah,
say I can write on the board, but I don't think any of you will be able to read it. And then
right.
someone will take it instead.
Yeah,
And that's all he does,
yeah, yeah, yeah. The
But
coping mechanisms,
I
yeah.
also interviewed Howard Wexler. He was like,
Mhm.
one of these, he's in like these toy inventor Hall of Fame. Like
Oh,
I don't know if you know the Connect Four, but it's
oh,
like
yeah,
the vertical kind of like
yeah.
you have to get them in a row. And he did all these like famous things, but then he got a PhD in psychology. But he said, I have this little trick. I just make sure the first letter and the last letter are really clear, and then I just make a bunch of loops.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, I'm gonna use that. Oh, that's great.
And he said, it got me through my PhD, and then I didn't have to write like that anymore. But it's so crazy to
20
have
years too late.
it.
I could have used that in so many places. Yeah.
I know, and it's funny because what was it? We had a conference where we had a bunch of people. It was years ago, but it was a dyslexic conference, and we had someone from PeopleSoft from Google, and
Hmm.
they said we've noticed that our system architects don't seem to have college degrees, you know,
Right.
and we were
Yeah.
wondering whether our recruitment is negative selecting out of some of the better system architects. And
Mm,
we said, yeah, it's
probably.
certainly a possibility, and so they were trying to look at that. And, it's things like that, having to write on the board, when that's not the job. The job is not writing on the board. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
different matter communicating, but it's not always writing on the board. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, it's kind of funny like that because there are these old habits in the system,
Yeah.
unfortunately, and it's really tough.
It's
It's like cold reads for actors. It's really,
mhm.
it it negatively selects against actors who might be very natural for,
R
because of that empathy, right? Being able
yeah.
to express all these different characters,
It's
you know?
and it's still tough, like, even if you get past that cold read or that interview, how do you know you're not gonna be in a situation where they're judging you based off of things that are just not set up for you? And I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah,
I'm just not good at that." Like, if you want to judge me at any moment on my ability to communicate through written language, like, it's not gonna get better. Like, I had to try to really accept that. I was focusing on trying to get better at it, and I was losing my skills in so many other areas.
yeah.
Um, but one thing you talked about the conference and things. I would love to be more a part of the dyslexic community because again, I'd love uh, to find more people like myself that struggle with things and have those moments where it's like, oh, I just make the first letter and last little word, like to share these stories.
Yeah,
That would
I
be
know.
beautiful. So I'd love to
Yeah,
be a
yeah,
part.
so, well, we had funding in those days, so
Mhm,
I don't know if we will, but I keep hearing about this, and certainly
mhm.
your area, there's a lot, I mean, there's just
Okay,
people, yeah. It was really fun. We had, because 'cause we're a nonprofit, and
sure,
so
sure.
all we could do, it was like, I don't know if you know this fable of stone soup where you have nothing to eat,
Mhm,
but you just have a stone, you have people keep adding things, so it's kind of a little bit
mhm,
like
mhm,
that. We had the money to actually get the venue and to have
mhm.
food, but we didn't have money to pay people to show up, but people all loved being there because they were all together for the first time.
Yeah, yeah.
It was a blast. It was
Right.
wonderful, and, yeah, no, just all but
I
we
just I just want a support group. We
yeah,
meet
yeah,
up once a month to
exactly.
talk.
Yeah, well, we just gotta think about it because there's
Yeah.
just definitely ways to do it. Yeah, no,
Mhm,
actually in your area,
mhm.
Douglas Merrill, do you know Douglas Merrill?
No, I don't know
Oh,
this
yeah,
one.
so he was the first chief information officer for Google,
Oh,
and he's
awesome.
dyslexic, and
Awesome,
he
yeah.
was kind enough to come to our conference without getting paid. We did put
Yeah.
him up in a place to stay, you know?
Right, right.
Yeah, but it was great because,
Mhm.
you would have no idea. Really into games and
Awesome.
now I think he's doing Zest Finance, so he's doing other stuff,
Sure, sure.
but at the early days, I mean, I think people would have thought that's incompatible, and
Yeah.
I when we interviewed him for the book, we thought that he must be good in math, and he said, "No." So
Mhm.
surprised me, I mean, I 'cause I thought if you're computers, but I think some of that, his
Mhm.
talent set was that systems thinking. It was
Yes,
you
yeah,
know
putting
that
it
you
all
have.
together.
Yeah,
Mhm,
and a lot
mhm,
of people just don't have that, and if you know where things are going, like the D strength, everyone, it's going here. A lot of
mhm,
people don't know that it's going that direction, that's,
mhm.
the trend spotting, these,
Yeah,
I think
trend
that's a
spotting.
huge aspect of games because there's competition, things are
Mhm,
always evolving and things like
mhm.
that too,
I've
so
I've noticed that in games and in like stocks and stuff. I'm like, "Oh, I've just hey, a lot of people like to do yoga and they like to wear Lululemon. Like, let me get that," you know?
yeah, 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 no, and that can be also very visual. It's
Mhm,
it's trend, but it's also visual with graphs and all this kind of stuff too.
mhm,
So
mhm,
yeah,
mhm.
no, another, definitely, superpower,
Yeah,
as you say, so
cool. Well, did
anyway.
did did you have any other questions for me? This has been super fun. Thanks for reaching out, and if you
Yeah,
need any more information or ever to talk to me, you got my
yeah.
information now, so it's
Fantastic. Yeah,
yeah,
no,
let's
it's
do it.
been it's been great connecting. At some point, maybe I'll try to Brock is very focused now on neurolearning, which is this thing
Okay,
it's an
okay.
online dyslexia screener, but sometimes, we'd love to have you guys meet too, because
Oh, cool.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's great.
I'm down.
Yeah.